Caitlin Clark did not just bring new fans to the WNBA. She brought a problem the league was not ready to handle. Every hard foul becomes national news. Every missed call becomes a debate. Every viral clip turns into a courtroom. Fans take sides. Players take sides. Coaches take sides. The media takes sides. And suddenly, one basketball play becomes bigger than basketball. That is exactly what happened after the incident between Caitlin Clark and Alyssa Thomas. A play that was not called in real time. A league review that came later. A one-game suspension. A wave of criticism. A wave of harassment. And a conversation that became much bigger than one foul. But here is the part most people are missing. This is not simply about whether Caitlin Clark should be protected. And it is not simply about whether Alyssa Thomas crossed the line. The real story is deeper than that. The WNBA wanted the Caitlin Clark effect. It wanted the attention. It wanted the sold-out arenas. It wanted the television numbers. It wanted the new fans. It wanted the cultural relevance. But now, the league has to manage everything that comes with that attention. The physicality, the officiating pressure, the player safety debate, the fan wars, the online abuse, the resentment, the money, the expectations, and the uncomfortable truth that Caitlin Clark has become so big that the league can no longer treat her games like normal games, because they are not normal anymore. When Clark gets hit, the clip travels everywhere. When Clark reacts, people study her face. When Clark stays quiet, people create their own meaning. When Clark speaks, every word becomes a headline. This is superstar pressure. And the WNBA is learning, in real time, what happens when one player becomes larger than the system around her. Caitlin Clark is not the WNBA's problem. The problem is that she made the WNBA too visible for its old habits to survive. Let's start with the moment that brought all of this back to the surface. Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury. June 24th. Alyssa Thomas makes contact with Caitlin Clark near the throat area. In real time, no foul is called. And that detail matters. Because if the officials had stopped the game immediately, reviewed the play, and handled it on the floor, this might have stayed inside the game. It would still have been debated. It would still have been clipped. But the league would have looked in control. Instead, the moment was missed in real time. Then it spread online. Then fans reacted. Then media outlets picked it up. Then the WNBA reviewed it. Then Alyssa Thomas was suspended for one game after the play was assessed as a flagrant 2. And by that point, the conversation had already escaped the basketball court. Now it was no longer just about Thomas. It was about officiating. It was about whether the league protects its stars. It was about whether opponents are too physical with Caitlin Clark. It was about whether the WNBA is ready for the audience it now has. And that is where this story becomes complicated. Because two things can be true at the same time. Alyssa Thomas can be a hard, physical, respected competitor, and the play can still deserve punishment. Caitlin Clark can be tough enough to handle professional basketball. And the league can still need better officiating. Fans can be angry about a missed call, and harassment toward players can still be completely unacceptable. That balance matters. Because if the conversation becomes only protect Caitlin at all costs, then every other WNBA player gets unfairly treated like a villain. But if the conversation becomes, this is just basketball, then the league ignores the fact that the spotlight has changed. The old answer is not enough anymore. The WNBA cannot simply say, this is a physical league, and move on. Because the world is watching now. More people are watching. More casual fans are watching. More sports media is watching. And when more people watch, the standards change. That is the real issue. The Caitlin Clark era has raised the standards, and the WNBA has to catch up. To understand why this moment exploded, you have to understand why Caitlin Clark is different. The WNBA has had legendary players before: Lisa Leslie, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Maya Moore, Candace Parker, Aja Wilson, Breanna Stewart. These are not small names. These are champions, MVPs, icons, and pioneers. So this is not about pretending the league had no stars before Caitlin Clark. It did. But Clark brought a different kind of attention. Not just basketball attention. Mainstream attention. Casual sports attention. Argument attention. Television attention. Social media attention. People who never watched a full WNBA game suddenly knew when the Indiana Fever were playing. People who did not know the standings knew when Caitlin Clark got fouled. People who never cared about WNBA referees suddenly had strong opinions about WNBA referees. That is the difference. Clark did not just add fans. She added pressure. And pressure changes everything. Before this level of attention, a missed call could stay mostly inside WNBA circles. A hard foul could be discussed by league fans, local reporters, and a few basketball analysts. Now, that same moment can become a national story. That is what superstars do. They change the scale of every event around them. When Michael Jordan took a hard foul, it was not just a hard foul. It became a question about how teams were defending him. When LeBron James got criticized, it was not just criticism. It became a national debate about pressure, legacy, and expectations. When Stephen Curry changed basketball, every defensive strategy around him became a story. Caitlin Clark is creating that same effect inside the WNBA. Her presence makes everything bigger. The ratings are bigger. The crowds are bigger. The debates are bigger. The criticism is bigger. The criticism is bigger. The mistakes are bigger, and that means the league's margin for error is smaller. The WNBA does not get to operate quietly anymore. Not when Caitlin Clark is involved. And that is both the opportunity and the problem. Now let's talk about the physicality. Because this is where the debate gets emotional. Caitlin Clark is not the first young star to be tested physically. That is part of professional sports. Veterans test young players. Defenders bump shooters. Teams try to make elite guards uncomfortable. A player who controls the ball, shoots from deep, draws attention, and changes defensive schemes is always going to get hit, bumped, trapped, grabbed, and challenged. That part is normal. But there is a difference between physical basketball and uncontrolled contact. And the WNBA has to define that difference more clearly. Because right now, every Clark incident gets filtered through fan emotion. Some fans see every foul as proof the league hates her. Some fans see every complaint as proof Clark gets special treatment. And in the middle of those two extremes, the actual basketball discussion gets lost. The real question is not whether Clark should be untouchable. She should not be. No great player is untouchable. The real question is whether the league can officiate her games with enough consistency that the product feels credible. That word matters. Credible. Because when casual viewers watch a game and see obvious contact missed, they do not think like longtime WNBA fans. They do not say, well, this league has always been physical. They say, why was that not called? And if that question keeps repeating, it creates a trust problem. Not just for Caitlin Clark fans, for the entire league. Because a league trying to grow cannot have its biggest games overshadowed by officiating arguments every week. It cannot have every viral moment turn into a referendum on whether the refs are prepared. It cannot have players feeling unsafe and opponents feeling targeted by online mobs at the same time. That is a dangerous combination. And this is why the Alyssa Thomas incident mattered so much. Not because it was the only physical play in the WNBA, but because it became a symbol of a bigger concern. The concern that the league is growing faster than its game management systems. Officiating is never easy. Every sports league complains about referees. NBA fans complain. NFL fans complain. College basketball fans complain. WNBA fans complain. That part is normal. But in the Caitlin Clark era, officiating is no longer a small operational issue. It is a major part of the league's credibility. When Clark gets hit and nothing is called, the clip does not disappear. It gets posted. It gets slowed down. It gets replayed. It gets zoomed in. It gets debated by fans who already believe the league is either failing her or favoring her. And once that happens, the officials are no longer just officials. They become part of the story. That is bad for the league, because the best officiating is invisible. Fans should be talking about the game. They should be talking about the shot making, the defensive schemes, the rivalries, the coaching decisions, the playoff race, the all-star selections. But when the league's most viral moments become missed calls, suspensions, and referee debates, the product starts to feel unstable. That is why Caitlin Clark calling for better officiating matters. It was not just a personal complaint. It was a business warning. Because she understands something important. If the WNBA wants to keep these new fans, the games have to feel professionally managed. The league cannot depend only on Clark's popularity. Popularity brings people in, but product quality keeps them there. And officiating is part of product quality. Player safety is part of product quality. Discipline is part of product quality. Communication is part of product quality. The WNBA is no longer just selling basketball to longtime fans. It is selling a national sports product to a much bigger audience. And that audience has expectations. Some of those expectations may be unfair. Some may come from fans who do not understand the league. But the league still has to deal with them. That is what growth means. Growth is not just more money. Growth is more responsibility. Now we have to talk about the part nobody should ignore, the harassment. After the Alyssa Thomas incident, the conversation did not stay in basketball territory. Thomas said she received abuse and threats. Clark publicly condemned harassment toward players and coaches. And that is where the conversation has to be handled carefully. Because being angry about a basketball play is normal. Criticizing a foul is normal. Criticizing officiating is normal. Calling for league accountability is normal. But threatening players is not normal. Racist abuse is not normal. Attacking players' families is not normal. Turning a basketball debate into personal hatred is not normal. And it hurts the league. It hurts Caitlin Clark. It hurts Alyssa Thomas. It hurts every player who now has to perform under a microscope. And it gives the WNBA another problem. How do you welcome millions of new fans without letting the worst part of online sports culture take over the conversation? That is not an easy problem. But it is now the league's problem. Because the Caitlin Clark effect did not only bring respectful fans, it brought everyone. Casual fans, new fans, old fans, angry fans, political fans, sports debate shows, social media accounts chasing engagement, people who love the WNBA, people who hate the WNBA but watch because Caitlin is involved. That is a complicated audience. And when the audience becomes complicated, the league has to be stronger. It has to defend its players. All of them. It has to protect Caitlin Clark from dangerous play. It also has to protect Alyssa Thomas from threats. It has to protect Angel Reese from abuse. It has to protect referees from becoming targets. It has to protect the product from being swallowed by toxicity. This is the part some fans do not want to hear. You cannot build a healthy league by turning every opponent into an enemy. Caitlin Clark does not need that. The WNBA does not need that. The sport does not need that. What the league needs is accountability without dehumanization. That is the line. And right now the league is struggling to hold that line. This is where Sophie Cunningham enters the story. Because in the new Caitlin Clark ecosystem, teammates matter more than ever. Fans are not only watching Clark's shots, they are watching who stands near her. Who helps her up? Who responds when she gets bumped? Who talks to the refs? Who sends a message without crossing the line? And that is why Sophie Cunningham has become such an important character in this story. She represents something fans believe the Fever need. Protection. Edge. A teammate willing to push back. A player who understands that basketball is not only skill, it is also presence. It is also attitude. It is also making sure your star does not feel alone. Now, that does not mean Sophie Cunningham should turn every game into a fight. That would be bad basketball. But it does mean the Fever need players around Clark who understand the emotional temperature of these games. Because when Clark is on the floor, the game is not normal. The crowd is louder. The opponents are more physical. The media is watching. The clips are waiting. The fans are ready to react. And in that environment, teammates become part of the protection system. Not just physical protection, psychological protection, emotional protection, competitive protection. That is why your audience is so interested in the "Who protects Caitlin?" question. Because it is not just about one foul. It is about whether Indiana Fever can build the right ecosystem around the most watched player in the league. Every superstar needs that. Jordan had teammates who understood the battles around him. LeBron had veterans, enforcers, shooters, and locker room voices around him. Curry had Draymond Green. Great players do not win alone. They need structure. They need trust. They need teammates who absorb pressure with them. And for Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham has become one of the faces of that idea. Not because she is the biggest star, but because she gives the story something it needs. A counterweight. If Clark is the engine, Sophie is the edge. And in a league that is becoming more physical, more watched, and more emotionally charged, that edge matters. But the league's problem is not only on the court. It is also in the stands. And online. Caitlin Clark has one of the most intense fan bases in American sports right now. That is powerful. It sells tickets. It drives ratings. It creates viral moments. It makes every Fever game feel important. But intense fan bases also create risk. Because when fans feel emotionally attached to one player, they do not always see the game clearly. Every foul feels personal. Every referee mistake feels intentional. Every opponent becomes suspicious. Every quote becomes disrespect. Every ranking becomes a conspiracy. Every poster, every all-star vote, every media segment becomes evidence of something bigger. That is exhausting for the league. It is also exhausting for Clark. Because suddenly, she is not just playing basketball. She is carrying the emotions of millions of people who believe they are defending her. And sometimes that defense becomes too much. That is why Clark's comments about harassment were important. She is trying to separate basketball criticism from personal attacks. She can want better officiating without wanting opponents abused. She can be frustrated by physical play without wanting fans to threaten people. She can be competitive without needing every conversation to become toxic. That is maturity. And the league needs to match that maturity. Because right now, too many conversations around Clark become extreme. One side says the league is trying to hurt her. Another side says she gets too much attention. One side says every opponent is jealous. Another side says her fans are ruining the league. But the truth is more complicated. Caitlin Clark is growing the WNBA. Her fans are helping the league grow. Some of those fans are also making the discourse worse. Other players deserve respect. The league still needs to protect its biggest draw. All of those things can be true at once. And a serious league has to be able to hold complicated truths. Now let's talk about the part the league cannot ignore. Money. Because all of this attention is not happening in a vacuum. Caitlin Clark is not just a popular player. She is a business force. Her games create more conversation. Her highlights travel faster. Her team draws more attention. Her rivalries get amplified. Her presence changes how people talk about the WNBA. And when that happens, the league benefits. Broadcasters benefit. Teams benefit. Sponsors benefit. Merchandise benefits. Ticket sales benefit. Other players benefit from the increased visibility. That is the positive side of the Caitlin Clark effect. But there is another side. When one player becomes that valuable to the league's attention economy, the league has to protect the overall product around her, not by giving her unfair calls, not by making her untouchable, but by making sure the games feel credible, safe, and professionally managed. Because if every Fever game becomes a referee controversy, that is bad for business. If every hard foul becomes a harassment wave, that is bad for business. If every opponent becomes afraid of being attacked online, that is bad for business. If every player feels like the league only responds when Clark is involved, that is bad for locker room trust. And if Clark's own games become dominated by chaos instead of basketball, that is bad for her too. The WNBA needs Caitlin Clark. But it cannot become only Caitlin Clark. That is the balance. Use her star power to grow the league. But do not let the league become a battlefield where every other player is treated like a side character in her story. That is not sustainable. The WNBA's future cannot be built on resentment. It has to be built on competition. Clark versus great defenders. Clark versus elite teams. Clark and Aaliyah Boston building chemistry. Clark and Kelsey Mitchell pushing Indiana forward. Clark against Aja Wilson. Clark against Brianna Stewart. Clark against Angel Reese. Clark against the pressure of expectations. That is the version of the WNBA that can grow. Not constant outrage. Not endless conspiracy. Not harassment. Not missed calls becoming the main headline every week. The league has the attention now. The question is whether it can turn that attention into a better product. This is why the title matters. The WNBA has a Caitlin Clark problem, but not because Caitlin Clark is bad for the league. She is obviously not. She is one of the biggest opportunities the league has ever had. The problem is that the league now has to evolve because of her. Its officiating has to evolve. Its communication has to evolve. Its player safety systems have to evolve. Its media strategy has to evolve. Its ability to handle toxic discourse has to evolve. Its understanding of superstar pressure has to evolve. Before Clark, the WNBA could grow more slowly. It could build gradually. It could rely on its core audience. It could have internal debates without every moment becoming national news. That era is over. The league is now in the mainstream sports machine. And the mainstream sports machine is not gentle. It rewards stars. It punishes mistakes. It creates heroes. It creates villains. It exaggerates conflict. It turns clips into narratives. It turns narratives into identity. That is the world Caitlin Clark dragged the WNBA into. And now the league has to decide what it wants to be. A league that complains about the pressure, or a league that rises to the pressure. Because this opportunity may not come again in the same way. Generational attention is rare. Most leagues spend decades trying to create a player who can pull casual viewers into the product. The WNBA has that player. But having the player is not enough. You have to build the system around the player. You have to make the games feel important. You have to make the officiating feel professional. You have to make the players feel protected. You have to make the rivalries feel competitive, not toxic. You have to give fans reasons to stay after the viral clip ends. That is the next challenge. Caitlin Clark brought the audience. Now the WNBA has to keep it. So what is the real lesson from all of this? It is not that Caitlin Clark needs special treatment. It is not that Alyssa Thomas should be turned into a villain. It is not that every WNBA player is jealous. And it is not that every Clark fan is toxic. The real lesson is that the league has entered a new era. And in a new era, old systems get exposed. Missed calls get exposed. Slow responses get exposed. Weak communication gets exposed. Fan toxicity gets exposed. Media exaggeration gets exposed. And yes, the burden of being a superstar gets exposed too. Caitlin Clark is living in the middle of all of it. She is trying to play basketball while carrying a level of attention the WNBA has never fully had before. Opponents are trying to compete against her while also dealing with the reaction that comes with every physical moment. Referees are trying to manage games that now get dissected frame by frame. The league is trying to benefit from the attention while controlling the chaos created by that same attention. That is the Caitlin Clark problem, not the player. The pressure around the player. And if the WNBA handles this correctly, this can become the moment that forces the league to grow up. Better officiating, better safety, better communication, better storytelling, better protection for all players, better use of its new audience. But if the league handles it badly, the same attention that created growth can create division. The same fans who bring ratings can create hostility. The same viral clips that introduce new viewers can make the league look unstable. The same superstar who opened the door can become the center of endless controversy. That is why this moment matters, because the WNBA is not just managing Caitlin Clark. It is managing what Caitlin Clark represents: a bigger audience, a bigger business, a bigger spotlight, a bigger standard, and a bigger responsibility. The league wanted the Caitlin Clark effect. Now it has to prove it is ready for everything that comes with it. So the question is simple. Is the WNBA ready to protect its players, control the chaos, and turn this attention into real growth? Or is the Caitlin Clark era moving faster than the league can handle? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want deeper WNBA stories like this, not just highlights, but the real meaning behind the biggest moments in the league, subscribe, because this season is becoming bigger than basketball.